If you've tried to sell a used ham radio recently, you already know something feels different. Prices on used HF transceivers that once held their value are softening, and classic gear that used to disappear overnight at swap meets now sits for weeks with no buyers. The United States still has roughly 737,000 active amateur radio licenses on file, and that number keeps growing. But underneath those license counts, the used equipment market has been reshaped by several forces hitting all at once, and the result has been brutal. If you had walked through a Dayton Hamvention flea market 15 or 20 years ago, you would have seen a completely different world. Used high-frequency rigs from Collins, Drake, and Heathkit held their value remarkably well, almost like quality tools or musical instruments. An operator would buy a transceiver, use it for years, and sell it for close to what they paid when it was time to upgrade. The entire used market ran on scarcity, brand loyalty, and a generational cycle where selling the old rig funded the new one, and nobody walking those aisles would have predicted how quickly that ecosystem was about to come apart. For a long time, that world held together because entry-level amateur radio equipment had a natural price floor. A basic VHF or UHF handheld from any established manufacturer cost around $100 or more, and even the used versions retained most of that value. Then a Chinese company called Baofeng rewrote the math. Founded in 2001 in Fujian Province, China, Baofeng started producing dual-band handheld radios at prices that made the established manufacturers look absurd. The Baofeng UV5R, a basic dual-band handheld, sells for around $15 to $25, has over 10,000 reviews on Amazon at a 4.5-star average. And by 2025, the ARRL itself had published an official book on using Baofeng radios. Think about what that does to the second-hand market for used handhelds. When a brand new radio costs $20, nobody is paying $75 for a used name-brand handheld from 2010, regardless of how well it was built. The price floor for entry-level used gear effectively collapsed. Industry data shows that average selling prices for consumer-grade portable transceivers have been declining by roughly 7% per year since 2020, and Chinese manufacturers like Xiegu have pushed into the HF transceiver space with SDR-based rigs like the G90 that undercut the traditional manufacturers while offering features like built-in spectrum displays and antenna tuners. The pricing pressure from cheap imports was not a one-time disruption. Then in July 2017, something happened that permanently changed what ham radio operators actually needed from their equipment. Physicist and Nobel Prize laureate Joe Taylor, along with Steve Franke, released FT8, a digital communication mode designed for making contacts under weak signal conditions using 15-second transmission cycles. Within 2 years, FT8 became the most widely used digital mode on the HF bands, and by 2025, the ARRL described it as far and away the most popular digital mode in amateur radio. FT8 changed the economics of the hobby because a modest transceiver, a computer, a sound card interface, and a simple wire antenna could now work stations around the world that would have required a high-end rig and a beam antenna just a decade earlier. Operators living in apartments and HOA-restricted neighborhoods found FT8 far more forgiving than voice, which meant fewer people chasing the premium used transceivers that once commanded top dollar. Around the same period, Parks on the Air launched as an international radio sport program encouraging portable operation from parks and public lands, and it grew fast. By mid-2025, POTA had attracted over 49,000 active hunters and 29,000 activators worldwide. generating more than 15 million contacts in a single year. But POTA also reshaped what kind of used equipment people actually want. Instead of heavy base station rigs and tower-mounted beam antennas, POTA operators want lightweight, portable, QRP-capable radios with compact wire antennas and battery power systems, not the big iron that filled ham shacks for decades. That shift has been quietly propping up prices on one narrow category of portable used gear while pushing prices down even further on everything else. The same hobby that was already being reshaped by digital modes and portable operations then got a massive but short-lived burst of attention from the pandemic. When COVID-19 hit in early 2020, Ham Radio Prep reported that course signups jumped over 700% compared to the previous year. But in-person testing was disrupted across the country, and the ARRL reported that through July 2020, new amateur licenses were actually down 12% year over year, with upgrades down a staggering 23%. The enthusiasm never really translated into commitment. Some of those pandemic-era hobbyists bought equipment, often brand new, and then drifted away as lockdowns eased. Their barely used gear is now entering the used market alongside the Baofeng-driven price collapse, compounding a supply glut that keeps building. And starting in April 2022, the FCC implemented a $35 application fee for new licenses and renewals, adding friction at exactly the moment when pandemic-driven interest was already cooling off. And the timing of what happened next could not have been worse for the market. On April 25, 2024, Martin F. Ju, the 80-year-old founder of MFJ Enterprises in Starkville, Mississippi, announced that the company would stop production. MFJ was recognized as the largest producer of amateur radio products worldwide as recently as 2014, and over 52 years, Ju had also acquired Ameritron, High Gain, Cushcraft, Mirage, and Vectronics. All 6 brands went down together when Ju cited COVID-19 as the blow from which MFJ never recovered. Production officially ended on May 17, 2024, and while ITU Corporation of Indiana announced in April 2026 that it was acquiring the Cushcraft and High Gain brand names, the MFJ manufacturing operation itself remains permanently closed. And MFJ was not the only casualty that year. Around the same period, Amateur Electronics Supply shut down all 4 of its retail stores in Milwaukee, Las Vegas, Cleveland, and Orlando after 59 years in business. Ham Radio Outlet, the last major national retailer standing, has also been shrinking its footprint, closing its San Diego location in 2023. Sunnyvale back in 2017, and several others over the years. When the physical stores where operators used to walk in, test equipment, and buy used gear face-to-face start disappearing, more transactions move to online marketplaces where condition is harder to verify, comparison shopping is instant, and prices almost always trend in one direction. Every one of those changes is happening against the backdrop of a demographic reality that the amateur radio community has been watching unfold for a long time. The average ARRL member is 68 years old, and in many European countries, the average licensed operator is approaching 70. German statistics, considered among the most reliable tracking data in the hobby, estimate a net decrease of roughly 1 to 1.5% per year in active operators across industrialized nations. When operators pass away, the community refers to them as silent keys, and their families are left with entire shacks full of equipment they do not understand and cannot easily price. Whole businesses have formed around this, like Ham Estate LLC, which charges a 30% commission on radio estate liquidations and has had to restrict services to subscribers only because demand was overwhelming. That means a steady and growing stream of used equipment entering the market from estates, priced to move fast because families simply want the gear gone, layered on top of every other downward pressure this market is already facing. The used ham radio market did not collapse overnight, and the hobby itself is not dying, not with 737,000 active licenses and counting. What happened is that a generation's worth of assumptions about scarcity, brand value, and upgrade cycles all eroded at the same time. For sellers, used gear will likely keep losing value unless it falls into a few protected categories, like rare collectibles, in-demand portable rigs, or products from manufacturers that no longer exist. For buyers, this might be the best time in decades to build an amateur radio station on a budget. The used ham radio market did not break. The world it was built for just changed faster than anyone in the hobby expected.